Well, the burning of fossil fuels isn't the only thing wrong that we're doing. We are also screwing up the Earth system by doing a few other things as well. So it's not just the burning of fossil fuels. The fact of the matter is that as humans have developed, as our lifestyles have grown, there are so many other things that we have done to mess up our carbon cycle. Now, the big thing is the burning of fossil fuels, but it's not the only thing. So let's talk about some of the other things we have done. So the reality is fossil fuels aren't the only thing. The reason why is that we as humans have transitioned quite a bit in the last roughly 200 years. 200 years ago, we were primarily an agrarian society. What that means is that we lived in smaller towns. Those towns typically had most of what they needed available to them. They only imported certain things. But every town had a farm, every town had a butcher, every town had a doctor, every town had all these different things. Nothing was exported or imported, or only very, very few things were exported or imported. That was a very agrarian society. But that's not who we are now. We are now a very, very urbanized and very, very industrialized society. We now have a much, much, much larger population, and a lot of that population lives in city centers. This is massive economic development, and this is also a massive improvement in our state of life. I mean, think about this. 200 years ago, you didn't have electricity. If there was a pandemic going on, we couldn't Zoom teach. We'd all still have to gather up in a room together and still have to deal with the pandemic like that. We didn't have the benefits of air conditioning or climate control. We couldn't get in a car and go 20 miles in just a few minutes. We did not have any of those benefits. However, to get to that, yeah, we have used a lot of fossil fuels, and we have emitted a lot of carbon dioxide. But that's only part of the problem. We've also done a lot of other things to our planet that have messed up the carbon cycle and that have also messed up the balance of nature. And so what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of this module are some of the other things that we've done. So one of the biggest things we have done is deforestation, or as I like to say, we paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Bop, bop, bop. Well, believe it or not, that's actually only a tiny part of what we've done. Believe it or not, the primary purpose of deforestation is agriculture. In fact, approximately 80%, marinate on that for a moment, approximately 80% of all deforestation has been specifically for agriculture. About half of that for cattle farming, another quarter of that for smaller scale agriculture, and another quarter for larger scale agriculture. But the bulk of deforestation has been for agriculture. Only a tiny bit has actually been for urbanization. Only a tiny bit has been for urbanization. Now, that being said, deforestation has multiple effects on Earth's climate. Now, where is this mostly happening? Well, times have changed. The good old days of I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay, where you see Canadian lumberjacks out in the redwoods chopping them down, that's just not as common now. Believe it or not, the bulk of deforestation today actually is happening in our tropical rainforests. Primarily in our tropical rainforests. And in fact, much of our mid-latitude forests, our subpolar forest, our mid-latitude forest, our evergreen forests, have actually been growing back. We've actually been reforesting a lot of those regions. The United States, Russia, China, India, Iran, Turkey, a good chunk of Western Europe have actually all been reforesting a lot of their regions. And instead, a lot of poorer tropical countries have been seeing deforestation, have been seeing deforestation. Now, there's a big consequence to this. Our tropical rainforests are one of Earth's biggest carbon sinks. Now, they're not the biggest, but they're one of the biggest. And so by removing those trees and replacing them with crops, which are also carbon sinks, but not as big carbon sinks, we have actually reduced the amount of carbon sinking that's possible by doing that. We've reduced the amount of carbon dioxide that our natural system is taking from our planet, or that's taking from our atmosphere. So not only are we increasing carbon dioxide emissions, we're decreasing carbon sinks. Not to mention, but we also have a lot of dead trees left over. Believe it or not all of that goes into logging or building material or even paper. Believe it or not, the vast majority of it is either just left there to decay or is even burned via biomass burning. That's something that happens very regularly in China, in Brazil, in many tropical rainforests. That's something that actually regularly happens. Here's the crazy thing though. This isn't even the most concerning thing. The most concerning thing is what we are replacing these trees with. A giant component of what we are replacing these trees with are cattle farms. In fact, about half of all of our agriculture related deforestation is for cattle farming. Well, cows actually have a pretty bad side effect to them. They are major burpers and farters of methane. They burp and fart methane, and a lot of it. So by taking away trees and replacing them with cows, we're taking away a carbon sink and we're replacing it with a methane source. And if you remember, methane is actually 20 to 30 times as potent as carbon dioxide. What that means is that one molecule of methane kind of looks like this. If you're a chemist and you're watching this, don't yell at me. One carbon in the center, 4 hydrogens that are around the center. One molecule of methane is the equivalent of 20 to 30 times the amount of carbon dioxide. So 20 to 30 times as much carbon dioxide. So even adding a little bit of methane into our atmosphere has a big consequence to it. Has a big consequence to it. In fact, believe it or not, out of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, when it's all converted to carbon dioxide equivalent, meaning we take methane and we convert its effects into the equivalent of how much carbon dioxide and so on and so forth, 9.4% of all anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions or carbon dioxide equivalent emissions are just from cattle. And of that, 3.7% just from their burps. That is huge. That is one sector of agriculture responsible for almost 4%, or actually one sector of agriculture responsible for almost 4% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. That is insane. And yet, I don't know about you, I enjoy a good double-double from In-N-Out, and it shows. Um, I'm sure many people here enjoy a good steak, or enjoy a good burger, um, or enjoy um, or enjoy a good carne asada taco, or all of that kind of stuff. We are a meat based society here in the United States. That's not to say everybody. Other things such as veggies, beans, lentils, corn, and so on have a much smaller carbon footprint. And scientists are actually doing some really cool stuff creating essentially artificial meat now. Things like the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger. And in fact, in this course, you'll actually have a chance, if you want to try those things for extra credit. That will actually happen in this course. You'll actually get a chance to try that. I'm not going to make you do it, which is why it's extra credit. Um, but you'll actually have that opportunity. But just think about that. Cows themselves make up 9.4% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, and almost 4% just from their burps and farts. That is insane. So we're losing valuable trees. We're letting them decompose and give off carbon dioxide. We're replacing them with methane farting and burping cows. But is that all? We'll talk about what else is left next.